Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. 40 civilians have been killed in an attack by Afghan government forces in the southern Helmand province. Government officials say a wedding party came under fire during an operation against a nearby bomb factory. Provincial Council member Abdul Majid Akhundzada said 13 others were wounded in the raid. Earlier today, the Taliban say they captured the Jalrez district in central Maidan Wardak province after fighting with government forces. Spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid said 9 government troops were killed in the attack. He said Taliban fighters also destroyed 3 armoured personnel carriers. Meanwhile, the Taliban say US President Donald Trump will be responsible for any further bloodshed in Afghanistan. Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen said a Taliban delegation visited Beijing to discuss peace talks with China's special representative for Afghanistan. Shaheen said the group had reached an agreement with the US to resolve the crisis in Afghanistan. Criticizing the upcoming elections, the Taliban called the process a game of elite politicians and a waste of money and time. The group's spokesperson said after spending millions last time, the public vote was rejected and Afghanistan's president was appointed by the US. They called on Afghanistan citizens and political figures to boycott the presidential polls. Now, for more on this, we're joined by Kabul-based political analyst, Mr. Intizar Khadim. First of all, welcome to Indus News, Mr. Intizar, and thanks for your time. So, as Afghanistan's general election is approaching, the situation does appear to be getting worse every day. Do you think the government can hold a peaceful ballot in this time?
Well, thank you. I think you're right. We're just juggling ball at the same time. From one side, there is a hope for a peace deal that should have happened, and from the second side, we're preparing for election. The big critique of the analysts and also the opposition from government and from opposition of election, that they said that holding election for the sake of election is not a solution for democracy in Afghanistan, because though we're a new democracy, started in 2001, but we're just getting worse day by day. The 2014 election, where John Kerry just carved up the power and put in the hand of Dr. Abdullah and Dr. Ghani, have not been a very good experience. Now, people are hesitant in Afghanistan to get out again and vote for someone where their rights will be disfranchised. We're happy as a nation to hold election, but we would like to make it fair, transparent, and accountable. And on the other side, there is a peace which is now moribund, which is now nascent. It was a bad call in a bad time from Donald Trump, where he just called off the peace talk. Now it's a slugfest between Taliban and the American and the Afghan government. Afghan government and the United States are trying to hit hard the Taliban to surrender, and Taliban are just revitalizing their commitment for a long-term fight. So it's an apocalypse. We're just living in an environment of hope and fear. I hope this holding election will be a new chapter of democracy, unless I think we can drench in another bloodshed in chaos.
Right, well, Mr. Khadim, we know that after 9 rounds of the peace talks in Doha, Mr. President Donald Trump ended the talks very, abruptly. So, but both parties do seem eager to restart these talks. What do you think is the possibility of rekindling of these talks, given what has happened so far?
As Donald Trump said, it did. I think it's not dead. You cannot kill a process which will be taking new life every single day. Peace is now the demand of the Afghan public. The 2 sides or 3 sides who are involved in war, they cannot fight for 100 years. That the countries in the region, including China and Russia, are more eager to be involved in peace process, because a drenching, a deepening grim in insecurity in Afghanistan can harm their stability as well. China invested $42 billion in Gwadar in Pakistan, and they already prepared to spend $100 billion of other dollars on One Belt and One Road project. The recent trip of Taliban leadership is a clear signal from the Chinese government, who are trying to graft the broken parts of the peace deal. So the next phases, which I can predict, is the resumption of peace talk. No matter Donald Trump is called did or didn't program or whatever, but I'm thinking that there is no B option table. The only thing each person can take it from the table is the resumption of talking, and I'm hoping it will start, but it could be costly. More people will die every day, but ultimately there will be a peace deal.
Right, well, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Intizar Khadim. Moving on, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has met British Prime Minister Boris Johnson in New York. The meeting comes ahead of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Prime Minister Khan will also meet US President Donald Trump later today. PM Khan will brief Trump on the worsening situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir after its illegal annexation by New Delhi. The two leaders will also discuss the Afghan peace process and bilateral relations. Khan vowed to highlight violations of international law that are taking place in the occupied valley under New Delhi's curfew. Prime Minister Khan is also scheduled to meet China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi today. And in New York, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has called on Amnesty International Secretary General Kumi Naidu. PM Khan informed Naidu about the humanitarian crisis in occupied Kashmir after India stripped the region of its autonomy on the 5th of August.
At a meeting in New York, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has informed Amnesty International's Secretary General Kumi Naidu about the humanitarian crisis in occupied Kashmir after India stripped the region of its autonomy on the 5th of August. The Prime Minister said India is not allowing human rights organizations to visit the valley, which has been under a curfew for over a month. Khan lauded the role of Amnesty International for highlighting the plight of Kashmiris. Naidu briefed the Prime Minister on Amnesty's advocacy work on Kashmir, including the hashtag Let Kashmir Speak campaign. In a separate meeting with Senator Lindsey Graham, Khan discussed the deteriorating situation in occupied Kashmir. He urged Graham to continue highlighting the Kashmir issue on all forums.
US presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders has criticized President Donald Trump for attending the Indian Prime Minister's Howdy Modi event. Calling Narendra Modi's government an authoritarian regime, Sanders slammed Trump's silence over the ongoing lockdown of Indian-occupied Kashmir. Sanders said Modi unilaterally revoked Kashmir's UN-recognized autonomy, cracked down on dissent, and jailed all political leaders. In his article in the Houston Chronicle, Bernie wrote Kashmiris are struggling to access life-saving medicine due to New Delhi's curfew. Former Chief Minister of Occupied Kashmir, Mahbooba Mufti, also slammed Modi's rally and his comments on Article 370. In a tweet, Mufti said a mass hysteria is orchestrated across the world to justify the move, while the valley is completely gagged. Earlier, hundreds of people have taken to the streets of Houston to protest India's human rights violations in the occupied valley. Demonstrators from the Pakistani, Kashmiri and Sikh communities demanded that India lift the curfew in the valley. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed a public meeting in Houston. Protesters say that under Modi's Hindu nationalist government, human rights, including religious freedom, are endangered. They also highlighted India's crackdown on Kashmiris in the occupied valley. The protesters also demanded an end to the communications blackout in Indian-occupied Kashmir. New Delhi's lockdown in occupied Kashmir has now entered its 50th day. In India, one person has been beaten to death and two others seriously injured after they were accused of killing a cow and lynched by a mob. They were attacked in the district of Kunti in Jharkhand state. The police have identified the victims as tribal Christians. They say 15 villagers attacked the three men for allegedly selling beef. The survivors were taken to hospital with serious injuries. This is the second lynching in 3 months when a Muslim boy named as Tabriz Ansari was killed after being accused of theft. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says Washington's new sanctions point to the U.S. desperation over Iranian resistance. Under the sanctions, the U.S. has blacklisted Iran's central bank for a second time. Iran's president will introduce a regional peace plan dubbed HOPE, or the Hormuz Peace Endeavor, at the UN Assembly. Rouhani said all countries in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz and United Nations are welcome to join the plan. Last week, the United States imposed another round of sanctions on Iran, including on its central bank, which was already blacklisted. Attacks on Saudi oil facilities on the 14th of September prompted the new sanctions. U.S. officials have accused Iran of being behind the attacks. Tehran denies involvement in the attacks, which were claimed by Yemen's Houthi movement. France says its main priority at the UN General Assembly is to de-escalate tensions between the US and Iran. But Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says it is not aiming to organize a meeting between the US and Iranian presidents. France has been leading European efforts to defuse Gulf tensions and salvage the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. This appears to have stalled, with Tehran reducing its commitments even further. The recent airstrikes on Saudi oil facilities, which the US of course blames on Iran, have only added to these tensions. French Foreign Minister Le Drian says it is imperative to get to the bottom of the attacks to give a firm political response. French President Emmanuel Macron will meet Iranian President Hassan Rouhani on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Britain accuses Iran of being behind attacks on Saudi oil facilities. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the UK will work with the US and European allies on a joint response. Speaking to reporters en route New York, Johnson claimed Tehran is responsible. He said the UK will closely watch a proposal by the United States to do more to help defend Saudi Arabia. Johnson said he will discuss Iran's actions in the region with President Hassan Rouhani at the meeting. He will also push for the release of several dual-national Iranians being held by Tehran. Earlier, Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said there is not yet enough evidence to fix responsibility for the attacks. Iran has said a British-flagged oil tanker in its custody is free to leave. Tehran's Revolutionary Guard seized the vessel over 2 months ago from the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's government spokesman Ali Rabi said legal process is finished and that the oil tanker can leave as and when it pleases. Talking to the media earlier, the Swedish owner of the oil tanker said Iran may release the seized vessel within hours. The chief executive of Stena Bulk, Eric Hanel, says he has received information suggesting that the ship will be released soon, and he says this is a political decision to release it. With that, we're going to take a very short break, so don't go anywhere. More stories to follow.